All right, everyone, we're now live. You may proceed. Thank you.
All right, everyone, we're now. Good morning. I'm Chair Barry Bialik, and I would like to welcome you to the July 1, 2021 Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through committee meetings a bit differently. We are hoping to be live in our next August meeting. We're streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on our committee webpage. We also have an option for the public to listen and comment live by phone. For that, please dial 855-925-2801 and use meeting code 7663 to listen in. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. We'll now go through and introduce all the committee members who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you are not speaking. When you have a question, or would you like to speak, or when you'd like to speak, unmute your microphone. Please remember to mute your phone, option *6, after you are done speaking. Committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Let's see. Paul Heathman.
Good morning, I'm Paul Heathman.
Brian Methvin.
Good morning, Brian Methvin.
Margie Bukowski.
Good morning, it's Margie.
Chris Day.
Good morning, Chris Day.
Babs Phillip.
Good morning, Babs Phillip.
Good morning. Andy Barnett.
Good morning, everyone. This is Andy.
Brandy Woodyard.
Good morning, everyone. This is Brandy.
Good morning. I think that's Scott Adams. Looks like he joined.
Morning. This is Scott Adams.
Welcome. So recording, unless I'm missing anyone out there, if you do, please say hello. It looks like I'm looking for Dewana, Zakia, Joe, Amber. Anyone out there? Does not look it. And do we have Councilwoman Mosley? Did she call in or not today? I don't think so. Welcome, committee members. Welcome, community development staff. I believe we have, I saw Paul joining us and Angelica. All right, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. So first thing we'll do is approve our minutes from last. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Any questions? Anything you'd like to add before okay, can I get a motion to accept?
I move to accept the meeting minutes.
Thanks. Second on that?
Second.
Great. If we all can just raise our hands to approve minutes. Okay, great. Thanks all. All right, next up we have our community development updates. These are the updates that were provided for the HCD meeting from last time. Does anyone have any specific questions they'd like to ask on the updates we have?
I'd like to ask about the update on 319 Biltmore.
Thanks, Margie. Paul D'Angelo here from City's Community Development Department. We are waiting word from city management to see if the request to bring 319 Biltmore back to City Council will happen or not. I'm waiting on direction.
Thanks.
All right. And what about down payment assistance? Is there still in the phase of a new RFP being drafted?
Yeah, it looks like that RFP is going to hit the ground Monday, July 12th.
Okay.
Paul, how long are you giving everybody to respond to that?
Probably 2 months.
So be like mid-September.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Is it about the same as the first one, or was it modified?
Basically exactly the same, except walking with the parameters that have been discussed about possible some kind of compromise between what we put on the ground, which was forgiving after 30 years, and changing that to forgiving after 15. Otherwise, trying to keep everything the same.
Okay, great. And I'm trying to think, I don't. Cedar Hill, from our last meeting about the with purpose-built presentation, has there been any next steps discussed on that, or is it still about the same?
So right now, there is a draft memorandum of understanding between the Housing Authority and the City of Asheville being discussed and worked on.
Okay. Okay. I guess that's any. I guess that's anyone else have any other questions on that on community development updates, or should we move on? Okay. Any of the other, you have any comments or any questions on any of the other updates besides the standard ones, the CDBG or the CD homeless? Does anyone have any questions, or Paul, anything you want to say about those?
Paul, what is going on with, yesterday, of course, it hit the news that a lot of these people, the homeless, had been moved out of the hotel or motel that they were staying in. And the news media said that some people did not have a place to go. And then I heard later on that they did provide places for them to go. Can you update that?
Sure. I think in the updates for CV, CDBG CV updates, it talks about 160 people have cycled through the Red Roof Inn, which was set up specifically for the COVID response. And I think about 40 folks moved to permanent supportive housing. I think as of Tuesday, Wednesday, when our contract was up with Red Roof Inn, as we're moving away from COVID, there were about 50 folks left. All of them are working closely with Homeward Bound and other agencies, and all technically have a housing plan of some sort. But a housing plan doesn't always necessarily mean permanent housing. So some folks will transition to a shelter. We've had some folks who are actually transitioning with family members, which is great. Some folks who may elect to not go to a shelter or permanent housing, and may go back to doing their individual wishes. And so right now, I think about 50 people exited yesterday. Again, everyone with a housing plan, but that housing plan doesn't necessarily mean permanent housing. They continue to work with Homeward Bound through that transition and case management. And so we'll hopefully follow some of those folks and be able to report more in the updates.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions on those? Nope. Okay, cool. All right. So we have, let's see, our list of available homes that are less than 275,000. So there's a few more than last time, but still it's kind of slim pickings, and definitely, construction costs are still astronomical. Like some of the lumber futures started to come down, but it hasn't really shown up in lumber yet. So it's been a difficult game out there. I did have noticed at least more, like with COVID ending, there seems to be at least more people, like some more inventory of houses being listed, which is good. I've noticed a little bit uptick in that. Any on the list of houses of less than 275 for sale and condos and for under contract? Any questions or comments on that? Okay. And then we have the kind of the regional sales reports about Buncombe and Asheville. So obviously, average prices are at sky high new highs. It's going to be, it's such a challenge we have for affordable home ownership, for how to help turn that. And I mean, it's so frustrating. It's something that we as a committee and the city's focused on for years, but affordable home ownership is becoming even more and more elusive. Scott?
Yeah, I'll just add a quick personal anecdote. A house that I was recently renting recently sold for $40,000 over, and it was already listed at over $400,000.
Wow. Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, I'm just reading at a national level. I know one of the big issues has been the corporations coming in and purchasing homes for rental properties. Do we have any sense of how big an issue that is in Asheville?
I personally haven't seen it yet. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that or noticed that.
I mean, it's been the two big things that I'm just reading nationally is the conversion of traditional single-family homes into rental properties for investment purposes, not just at the entrepreneur level or local landlord, but at national companies. And then the second is conversion of these properties into Airbnb short-term rentals. And I'm just trying. It seems. Well, I know we're tracking home prices and availability, and we're just, there's some way we could either poll realtors or go through the register, registering homes, because when they register the property, it obviously would be registered under a corporate name rather than an individual's name or a trust. Anyway, just kind of keeping our hands on that to see how big an issue it is going forward.
Yeah, I was reading an article. Is that my background or I'm sorry. I mean, there are companies getting around the short-term rental method by purchasing them and then doing timeshare. So it's a fractional ownership of vacation rentals. It's common out in California now. There's one company that's been doing that, and I've heard some rumbling about that as an option here, because with the city not allowing short-term rentals of full homes. I have heard discussion of people suggesting to buy homes under a corporate name, and then rather than it be a short-term rental, using it as a timeshare, or fractional ownership. But I haven't seen a specific case of that. The only thing personally I can share is that the development I'm doing in South Asheville, which was reasonably priced homeownership. A bulk of the units are being purchased up by an investor for rental, but it's at least it's a local investor. But a bulk of units that were meant for individual buyers, because at that price point, it's the hardest to qualify for, as we know. So there's been a lot of interest in rental and been mostly local folks. Paul Heathman.
Yes, thanks. I can tell similar stories. I work with customers, all the time. Some investors, some lots of locals, and people moving from out of town. But it's all anecdotal, right? Like that's I don't know how we find out like what the numbers are, what percentage of our homes are being purchased by folks from out of town, whether they're going to live in those homes or rent them. It shows up. It shows up a year later on their Schedule E on their tax return, but obviously we're not going to see that either. So I don't know how to find out. Does anyone have any insight to that? Like, is there anyone putting this data together?
I'm not putting the data together, but I am tracking the property transfers in the Sunday paper every week. But it's hard to tell when you see the LLCs whether that's going for someone who's building something, or if it's someone that's going to make an investment and then turn around and rent it or divide it up. It doesn't state that. It's just literally the property transfer from one. But when it goes to an LLC, it makes me, question it.
I suppose if you did a pool of the GIS parcel data, and if you had a list or I guess a known list of quote unquote Wall Street investment firms that do this, that's one possible way to do a selection set and map that. I know that was recently done in Charlotte. Can put a link in the chat. The UNCC Urban Institute highlighted all of the properties owned by quote unquote big investment firms in Charlotte. Interestingly, it was this huge arc that corresponds with what's called and I lived in it, the crescent of poverty over the dome of wealth. I'll put that in the chat shortly.
Hey, Marjorie, if you could send me that list of all that you've been tracking on the property transfers, I'll just go through and look them up and see how many of them are out of area owners. And we'll just do it as a sample. I'll go back and do 2 months worth of data, just looking up all the LLCs and corporate names to see where they're resident, because it'll be on their property tax record where the bill's going.
One thing that you could do, if someone wanted to tackle it, Brian, you could do this if you want to kind of dive into some data specifically on that list we provide, like the list of the houses that close less than $275,000. That would be a sample, because that's then very, specific to our mission here. We can look at the list of who closed on those houses less than $275,000, and there's not that many of them, and to see if they're people or corporate names. We've done the most, there's not really good tracking data. The one time we did we were trying to do an ADU study several years back for the committee, and there was no data through development services or planning. So I had my staff, was trying to determine ADUs, how people were financing them and what were permitted. So what we did is, I had one of my staff members, we looked at all the permitted ADUs, and then we did the deed research for deed of trusts to see how they financed it or if they didn't finance it. And we were able to see who was able, if they put new mortgages on their properties for doing financing ADUs, if they did cash. And, I remember the result we came up with was that almost all of the ADUs that were built that particular year were almost all cash. So it showed, showing that the ADU, is a great tool, that one of the, is definitely easier to do for someone who's got a lot of equity. It's not an easy tool for, affordable housing. But that was an interest. It was a lot of data diving we had to do, but it was an interesting experiment. And I don't think development services has started tracking exactly ADUs yet, but they said they were going to start that, because right now there's no difference in permit for an ADU or for just like a single family. But I think they were going to add that tracking in, but they have not yet that I know of. But if you want a deeper, that I think that 275, the list of closed houses has MLS numbers. So I could send you a more detailed report if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great if I had the MLS numbers. Whatever data I can get, I'll go through and just look them up and just be able to see. I think it'd just be good. I'll report back at the next meeting just what we find. I'll do back the last 3 months and just see, how much activity there is.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah, we sold one house in the past 30 days. Close. We sold for about 200,000 in town, and it was to exactly who we wanted it to go to. It's to like a first-time home buyer, local resident. So that was reassuring. Just curious, Andy, what is the pipeline for Habitat right now?
We've seen a real spike in applications over the last several months. And in fact, we really for the first time ever had to briefly suspend our application process. We've got a full pipeline of folks for the homes we're going to build in the coming year, which is, really further out than we typically are. So we're definitely seeing a spike in demand and a lot of demand from folks who are qualified applicants on our part. So not sometimes we struggle to get, not only applicants, but qualified applicants, but we're not having any trouble at all. And I think that really also speaks to what we're seeing in the housing market. More folks are looking at, are interested in home ownership and seeing, nothing in the private market at their price range and looking toward affordable housing developers to meet their need.
Yeah, I saw Open Doors, the nonprofit, had reached out to me, and they're working on putting together a survey of their clients, and it was about a housing need. I think they're like still putting that together, but I'll share that. There was some interesting from the first little sample I bit. There's some interesting feedback I saw in it just about people having trouble either for like mountain housings, or even they mentioned like Habitat's programs that they've had trouble with them. But I'll share that with you. I thought it was interesting. One of the new reports we have is from the Housing Authority. I was reading through it. I didn't, it's kind of a new report. Brandy, can you kind of give us a rundown of what we're looking at so we can understand the data we're seeing?
Let me just give a little brief overview, and then if you have questions or if there's anything else you want me to report on or talk about, I'm open to any of those things. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but so total amount of vouchers that HUD has allotted to us is the 3,307, and that's with all of our different programs and voucher types. What we actually have the budget for are 3,054 vouchers, and we are currently leased at 2,925 vouchers. So we do still have some wiggle room to get leased up. We do have 135 vouchers out and assigned looking in the community right now, and that's we cover Buncombe County, City of Asheville. And then the rest on this report is just kind of our monthly checkup with that you guys probably aren't real interested in and actually what we do. The only other thing you might be, there's a column to the top right that says mobility moves, and that is actually moves that are from one of our developments out into the private landlord community. So they're taking their project-based voucher and they have requested a tenant-based voucher, and they are using that with a private landlord in the community. This report is from May. We had 5, but we actually have been seeing around 12 to 15 on average. So May was a little bit of a. Any questions or anything else that you may be interested in?
Brandy, I've got a question. For those who are looking to convert their project-based vouchers to tenant-based vouchers, are they usually doing that because they have already identified another landlord or someplace that they would be able to move into?
Not usually. Usually because they do have to live in one of our project-based voucher developments for 1 year before they can request a tenant-based voucher. Usually they're just wanting to start that process and get that voucher in hand. But I have not found, because we know how difficult it is to find affordable housing, and it's just the same for the folks that we assist. So no, I do not see that they've already found a place most of the time.
So I guess I'm curious, since there are, you've got 135 people that are currently looking, or 135 current voucher holders. So for those that, again, who are transitioning from the project-based to the tenant-based, I would be curious about how many of those end up like changing their minds or turning the tenant-based vouchers back in for their inability to be able to find things. I think she might be frozen.
You might have frozen.
Yeah. Oh, there she's
So,
back. She's back. Randy,
she looks kind of frozen.
I think you're muted now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
my screen just totally went blank. Great, the fun of internet. Can you ask Joe, can you ask that last question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just okay. So if the project-based voucher holders are not leaving, their units with the tenant-based vouchers and a new landlord lined up, and there are 135 people with the vouchers that are currently looking, and they're going into that pool, how many of them are actually having to stay where they are for lack of being able to find, a unit with a private landlord who's going to rent to them?
So our success rates are at about 50%. So about 50% of the people that are issued a voucher are not finding a place and are staying where they're at. And, some of our folks are staying where they're at because once they see what the market looks like, and, all of our project-based development units, all utilities are included, and when they go out into the private market, most landlords don't include utilities. You pay your own utilities. So there's some that like that, the market is not what they thought it was going to be, and or they're, it's better to stay where they're at. It works better for them, or they don't want to move, like I said, if you find a unit and it's way out in the county and so far from all of your support services and your support systems, that's not a great move for you.
Right. One more quick question. Sorry to hold things up, guys.
Sure.
So I'm assuming since they're guaranteed the ability to be able to go from project-based to tenant-based, then when they inform you that they're ready to do that, they take priority over anyone who would be on the waiting list for a voucher.
Correct. They have they have their top preference. So
Right.
we actually pull that list. They apply once their year is up, and they apply, and we actually pull that list every month. So we pull every month. Almost every month we're pulling that full list. So it's a pretty quick process for them to get that voucher.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the report and these numbers.
Sure.
That's great. Yeah. What is so could you just explain so there's project base and it has some initials next to it, and then tenant, what's the difference in those initials next to project base where it's like RAD and LH?
So that is RAD, Rental Assistance Demonstration, and that is what we converted all of our public housing from in 2014. And then project-based LH is Lifehouse, which is a project-based apartment complex in South Asheville. It's on Hendersonville Road behind Cinemark, and then VASH is our Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing vouchers. NED is our non-elderly disabled vouchers, and that has to be head of household non-elderly disabled. Mainstream is also non-elderly disabled, but that can be any member of the household in order to qualify. And then other is just all of our other just regular tenant-based vouchers.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Duana, you have your hand up?
Hi, I'm curious about y'all have the home ownership program as well. And people are able to transition into home ownership using their vouchers or through the family self-sufficiency program. And so with that one, how often what does the numbers look like for that program specifically around the home ownership? Are you getting a lot of those turned in, returned as well? Is the numbers similar?
So we currently have someone separately reports, but on that one, but we currently, I believe, have 61 homeowners on the program. And that works a little bit differently because yes, they do have to have a voucher, but they can, if someone is working with our homeownership program or team, they can just transfer into the homeownership program if they've been on the project base for a year. So a little bit different because with these other vouchers, you have a certain amount of time that you have to use your voucher before it expires. With the home ownership, it doesn't, you can use that. But yes, I think that they have been getting a lot of applications, but again, that slowed down some too because of the affordability aspect.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chris.
Just one quick clarifying. You said there were 135 are looking. Is there a typical time frame that it takes folks to find? What's the current?
So we issue vouchers for 90 days, and then they can request one 90-day extension for a total of 180 days, which most of the folks that we work with do go ahead and request that because a lot of times it takes them. So we find that it either takes them less than 30 days or close to up to the 180. Because if they've kind of already been looking before they got their voucher and they have a place lined up, it's a quicker process. But then, you know, a lot of folks, it takes that full 180 days because the market's so limited. Sure.
Babs.
Hi, yes. Just curious, if I wanted to learn a little bit more about the homeownership program, who would I talk to? I'm just curious to see, to learn really how that work, what the process is, eligibility criteria, and so on.
Sure. So currently Shonda Sanford, and I can put her email information in the chat box for everyone, and I can also shoot you an email separately if you'd like.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it would be great to look at some of the recent examples of how you know, you said if there's 60 that are current, you know, homeownership vouchers or that have been used, or 60 in the program, I'd be curious to look at like how many were done, you know, in the past year, and some examples, like property examples, so we can really look at what there is and how they've made that work to see what, you know, what's been successful, so we can see how we can prioritize doing more of those.
Absolutely.
No, this is great. I really appreciate this. This is great data. So just again, it's I guess I'm, you know, my naivety on this. So when a voucher is issued, you're saying someone has to live, they can't get a tenant-based one unless they've lived in one of your projects for a year? Did I misunderstand?
Right. I mean, that is the quicker process. We do pull from our tenant-based because there are some people that apply just for the tenant-based voucher, but that's a much longer wait list. So yes, they do have to live in one of our PBV developments for a year, and that is actually the faster way to get a tenant-based voucher.
Gotcha. Okay. One of the, you know, on the project I talked about, where one of mine where the investor is buying several for rental, there's also a local, you know, I guess philanthropic investor is the best way to put it. It's a lady who's buying two duplexes in my project, four units, and she's converting them to affordable housing herself. And her plan is to, you know, I think she's accepting tenant choice vouchers. She went through the Thrive program. And so, you know, so it is good to know that there are, you know, as there are like investors looking for money return, there's also investors looking for philanthropic, you know, just good vibes return, karma return. And, you know, so I think, yeah, I heard she was just, that was just approved through the Thrive program. And I think those are going to be available.
Yeah,
she's closing them. Oh, that's great. So those, like in that particular case, like, so that was like a new landlord signing up. Is that ones that people can apply direct through for a tenant voucher, or those ones that they would generally come from for your project base? I'm just more curious about this process. It is new to me, kind of fascinating.
So the ones that are working through Thrive, those are coming from our project-based voucher developments, and they have a tenant-based voucher, and those are the ones those come directly from our project-based voucher developments.
Cool.
Would it be possible to have Thrive come and talk to us? Again, I know they've been there once, but it's been a long time.
That would be great.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah, they've been doing a lot. And I think especially when we get live. Dewana?
So on your PVC, like for people who are trying to get into your project, into the housing, and so that they can get access to the tenant-based vouchers, there's still a waiting list for units. Like, are y'all still limited on the amount of units as well that y'all have available?
Yes. I mean, I don't report on that. I could certainly get that information for you, how much. But yes, we do still have a wait list. Our longest wait list is for 1-bedroom units. The 2- and 3-bedroom units go a little bit faster. But I would, like I said, I could absolutely get you those numbers. I don't want to of how long the waits are for those. But yeah, there is a wait list.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. Good data for us to have as well. Yeah, to see. So there's 135 who have vouchers and are looking, but also know what the wait list is and what that unit breakdown is. I think that'd be very helpful. That's one we've always heard about, but I think knowing that data, what the unit breakdown is, would be really helpful.
Sure.
Is the wait list for 1-bedrooms reflective of household size, or perhaps people trying to double up?
No, it's reflective of household size. That's our largest population, even in the developments, are 1-bedroom household families.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Barry, it's Paul here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I just wanted to say a special thank you to Brandy and from the Community Development Division. This is the type of conversation we really wanted to have about vouchers. So, Brandy, we're really grateful, as well as this reporting monthly. And taking a look at that data briefly, if 135 vouchers are on the street, about 50%, if I'm following, get returned on average. We're talking about 60, 65 folks who grab a voucher, 180 days later, they still can't find it. So that's why the importance of two things: the city not only requiring it, but also trying to find a way to incentivize it. And then we have been working with WLOS, with several of our voucher partners to pitch a story about the solutions from the community, where we need more folks in the community who happen to be landlords or apartment complexes to accept housing choice vouchers and learn more about the program, because it's really, it's sad to see somebody hit that voucher in the community. They have that supplemental rent and then they can't find a place to use it. So hopefully we'll have something with WLOS here soon. But just grateful for Brandy, so thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. And it is a valuable addition to what we do in this data. Thank you. I'll bring it up later, because it kind of, there's a conversation we started in one of our last meetings about what sort of because right now, as we know, for most new landlords to get the benefits that the city might have for offering affordable housing, there's usually long-term commitments, whether it's deed restrictions for 20 years that have to do that. I wonder if there's any more project-based, incentives or something that we can just discuss, because there might be more landlords, if there's some additional incentives for taking vouchers that can be offered to landlords that then they don't have to make long-term commitments. There might be, more landlords willing to kind of try this out. I think that's what Thrive is starting, but I don't think the city, from what I'm looking at, I don't think the city has any programs, even fee rebates, even minor fee rebates, unless there's like a long-term, there's at least a 20-year affordability deed restriction. Is that accurate, Paul? I don't see any incentives that don't have a 20-year deed commitment. Is that accurate, or am I misreading something?
Yeah, we are asking any folks to come to us for subsidy, whether it be trust fund or land use incentive grant or fee rebates. We are asking for that minimum 20-year affordability period.
Yeah, that might be a big discussion point moving forward. Like maybe half the incentives for half the time. 20 years is a long time to commit to something, and sometimes the returns are not that great. I was looking at I know the fee rebate is up for discussion, and I was rereading through that policy. There's not much benefits. The financial return for doing from a fee rebate is pretty minor, considering what the 20-year commitment someone's making. Anyway, I think that's something that could be open for discussion, like a lesser term for lesser incentive. All right, well, great. I guess we'll move on to our next item. I think what I'm going to do, I'm sorry, I did not reach out to everyone and set up anything for task forces, but we really do need to do this. I've been kind of sourcing for some other people to join. Could we right now work out a date for each of a separate meeting date that those on the the build committee and those on the connect can set up for this sometime July? It doesn't have to be the way we're setting it up. It doesn't have to be public meetings. It's just a task force meeting. But if you can all look at your calendars, it'd be great to just kind of maybe get that, set up some dates that would work.
Hey, Barry, would it be possible to get an emailed list of the names and contact information of who's on each one of those two subcommittees or task forces? Sorry. I think it's probably easier for us to schedule that if we know,
who's there.
If we can do that offline.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Sorry, I moved into my new house, and I just have internet now. I had to get a satellite installed, so I have internet. But yeah, I can take care. I'll do that.
Maybe others have a different approach, but I feel like we could spend the next 2 hours on the phone or on the meeting here trying to find a hour that everybody shares in common on their calendars.
Yeah, a doodle poll is a good quick way to just get a gauge on everybody's schedule. So I'll volunteer to do that for build.
Okay.
And I can do that for Connect if you get me the contact information for the folks that are on that group.
Okay, I'll get that out. Thanks, all. Any updates on the Planning Open Space Committee? Is it met again?
It has. We met yesterday, we made some progress, but then sometimes I think we're taking a few steps back. Not everybody was there. And so some of the decisions or suggestions that we came up with have to go back to the Forestry Commission, the Urban Forestry Commission, because they have a large say in what goes on. But sometimes we make progress and sometimes we don't. We're not ready to close out the meeting yet. I don't know, Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll diplomatically add that UFC, the Urban Forestry Commission, is insisting on, I guess, having either a final say on some of the considerations, namely for adding open space requirements in the RAD form-based code district, which already has its own language on open space, largely on the river, on the greenway and nearby parks. That was something that I pushed back against yesterday, and that I felt like a majority of the attendees and representatives speaking yesterday were in support of. So I guess just a point of contention has been that the UFC is one of 8 groups on this task force. And even from the beginning, one of the UFC members insisted on a consensus -1 approach. And I think that's what we have. And I may honestly just bring that up with city staff on our next meeting, just stating, look, if we can get a show of hands on the consensus -1 group. I've also pointed out to city staff that all the other groups have 2 members and the UFC technically has 4 members. 1 member has an overlap with the NAC Neighborhood Advisory Committee or Commission. So I've pointed that out and have just alerted that, city staff to at least, for lack of a better word, kind of police that in terms of voices and numbers. But the 2 biggest things are open space in the RAD, and also I think there's just a general feeling of scope creep from the UFC pushing forestry and tree issues into open space, which are 2 different things. So
we also sometimes just seem to continue to go round and round on the definition of open space in every meeting. So there's 20 some odd people on the committee and there's about 20 different viewpoints.
Cool. Well, thanks for the updates. I know sounds like it's been some fun meetings. Have they? I'm just curious. Have those been in person, or are those Zoom meetings?
They've all been remote to date.
Yeah, we're about 8 meetings, 7 or 8 meetings in. I feel like we're deep in the middle of it. I don't feel like I don't feel like we're near the finish line. I represent the development services group on that committee as well. So, but I do feel like it's the voice of trying to find the barriers and challenges in the ordinance associated with open space as it relates to cost-effective development are being flushed out and getting a louder voice. So I feel like as it relates to this board and the goals of this board and the goals of affordable housing for the city, I feel like the voice is in there and it's making, we're in the middle of it.
We definitely won't get to perfect, but we're getting toward good and better.
Agreed.
Good job, y'all. All right. Next up, so so we're going to be doing, we traditionally in the past, like a lot of housing trust fund applications and Luigi applications they've kind of been mentioned in some community development updates, but we always haven't seen the applications. They've generally gone right to HCD. We've kind of asked for us to be in the loop of that process a little bit more to be able to give some feedback before they go in, because there might be some level of due diligence that we as a committee might be able to share or offer that could assist the staff report or even suss out in detail ways based on our experience. So we have the opportunity with in this meeting. There's 2 return applications. Well, I think one's a return application for sure going in the Housing Trust Fund. For the Kirk Booth's garage conversions. So we have that Housing Trust Fund application is in our packet. So we have the ability to discuss that, ask any questions, discuss amongst ourselves. This is one that it's been kind of around a while. And this actually is an example of why we as a committee insisted we wanted to have some due diligence standards. Because I remember when this came through years ago, and it didn't necessarily suss through our committee very well. And I knew that at the time something was being allocated housing trust funds that zoning did not allow. I knew it did not allow it. So it's kind of been stalled for that for years. So it's good that, and I think now he's been able to work through some of that, and there's been some, changes. But, this is a good example of a project that why our committee members might be able to offer some input to round out a staff report before it goes to HCD, and then funding can get allocated for a project that's not possibly feasible yet or years out. Looks like we have, I see Jeff there. Looks like he's probably a representative of Kirk. Is that right?
I'm here representing Kirk today, Barry. Thank you.
Okay. We'll see. Krista, you've got your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak real quick, and I'm relatively new to this board, my second meeting, but my office has worked on both of the items A and B on new business, and so I don't know in terms of how our advisory group works and what our recommendations are, but I wanted to point that out, and we'll kind of defer to your guidance.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We're kind of a guidance board. We don't actually we make recommendations as advisors, but we don't really make policy. But it's good. But I think some of your insight in this will be helpful, and then just understanding like the history of this, and then how what our goal is, how when we see these applications come through, how can we make sure that these are things that can actually get funded. We've seen several come through over the years, or even recently ones that came through that I would have automatically questioned how that was even financially feasible. And sure enough, they've had to pull back out because it's not financially feasible. So I think there's, with the depth of experience we have and our broad range of experience, there's some, just questions we could add, can layer in that then could maybe assist the staff report. So this particular one, Jeff, do you want to give a kind of a background of what this is about and where it's at and why it's back here now?
Sure, happy to, Barry. And I'm on as Sheila O'Brien. I'm on her computer today. Somebody sees that name pop up. Sheila's my wife, and she anyhow. But I'm me. And good to see some faces that I recognize, and some that I don't. Thanks for letting me be here representing Kirk. This is, as Barry said, in 2017, or actually it was May of 2018, Kirk actually had a housing trust fund application submitted, which went through the approval process and actually was approved by the HCD committee for $525,000 to convert 21 garages into single bedroom apartments on existing projects. The 6 of those units did not need a rezoning, but 15 did. Although Kirk has worked with the city over the 3-year period, there are even though in some circles conversion of garages of this kind is like the easiest route, cost effective, already existing property, no displacement, easiest route to affordability. And as some of you may know, there's actually some action, it hasn't passed, but some action both in North Carolina and nationally to try to make this kind of conversion easier from a regulatory standpoint, particularly in North Carolina. As of now, there's no legislation that is passed that allows us in North Carolina to be able to make this kind of additional density in single family neighborhoods possible. So Kirk is going with the 6 units that where the density is allowable by right in that particular area. These are up on Nancy Street in Hazel Mill. I think you've seen the application and the location map. These are this was fairly typical of development that Kirk did back in that time, as the 21 units represent, where he was developing a single family house and then an ADU. So the single family house was a 2 or 3 bedroom unit. The ADU was a 1 bedroom unit above a garage. And now he's looking to convert those garages of the 6 units where it's allowable by right into ground level accessible 1-bedroom apartments affordable to households at 60% area median income. Kirk accepts and welcomes voucher holders. The source of his tenants are primarily from the helping agencies throughout the city of Asheville. So everyone from the VA through to Homeward Bound to the Housing Authority, Kirk works with all of those agencies to help place people, and a majority of the units that he owns throughout the city are actually occupied by voucher holders. The request back in 2018 in the approved Housing Trust Fund loan was at $25,000 per unit. And I think you all know what has happened in that time between then and now in terms of costs. Now still he's looking at an all-in conversion cost of about $43,000 to $45,000 per unit. He's looking at a Housing Trust Fund request of $33,000 per unit. With a commitment to, at least from initial cost estimates, of putting the rest in as the owner's contribution as equity into the project. The term he's looking for is to just tack onto the term of the existing Housing Trust Fund loans that actually made the 12 units on these properties that was made by the city on these properties. So each of these new units would have a 20 to a 23-year term of affordability in line with the existing term of affordability on those existing units. He's he's in the permitting process with Development Services and the city. As I said, he does not need any rezoning or any approvals in that line, but he's working with Development Services. As Chris pointed out, he is represented by Chris's firm in the permitting process. His plans have been submitted and is very close to permitting on these projects. His intent is to get going right away as soon as permits are issued and to occupy no later than early 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions I can, or to bring any input input that you have, or questions that I can answer back to Kirk. So again, thanks for the opportunity to present this and to thank you for considering this and giving some feedback on the project.
Cool. Great. Thank you, Jeff, and good to see you. And it looks like we do have a couple questions. Scott, I see your hand was up.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the overview. Were you referring earlier to, I can't remember the Senate bill, but essentially it was the missing middle housing bill at the state
Correct.
level, and also essentially making ADUs a by right use versus, I'm not well versed enough to know how they're permitted currently within the city. Is it through a conditional or other level of review?
Yeah, it would be actually making duplexes, triplexes, and quads a by right use in single family zoned neighborhoods. And
Right.
yes, that was what was going through the North Carolina legislature. It obviously didn't happen this year, but it's this is something that is happening not only in North Carolina, but this whole missing middle housing is a pretty hot topic of consideration throughout the country right now in terms of trying to address some of the barriers to affordable housing development, while also having that conversation about what is the place of single family neighborhoods in our country. So yes.
Right. Thanks.
Margie?
Since these are rental units, is there anything in the agreement with the city that would request or require him to maintain maintenance or property around the units themselves? Obviously, it's on the property of a home, but it is it's a garage apartment, but is there anything that in the contract with the city that the city can say you must maintain a certain level of maintenance or appearance of the actual unit itself, since it is a rental unit?
As far as I know, there are no requirements in the city for that to happen. I know, if I may say, I think we're all aware that, particularly around one of Kirk's projects, there have been issues in the past around trash. The conversations, Kirk made changes to the management of the trash situation on that property, and what had been, what do you call it, rollaways, trash cans, and now has installed dumpsters. He's continues his ongoing conversation with the city about that level of maintenance, and is certainly open to input on that question. I think his belief right now, and comments that he has received from the city sanitation department, is that situation had been resolved.
Okay. I was also talking about the actual appearance or maintenance of the structure itself as it goes through the years. So,
I mean, I think that no, there is no current requirement in city funding that puts forward a maintenance standard.
Yeah, I think that's citywide. I don't think there's obviously code enforcement for any complaints, but yeah, I don't think there's many city rules that dictate how anything could look.
Actually, there's a state law that prohibits design regulations on 1 and 2 family attached dwellings. So yeah, just quickly following on that, I guess the question always comes up: what about the parking? Is the parking that was previously in the garages just being externalized to all surface parking?
Those garages were actually not used for parking. They were essentially leased as standalone storage, okay, or made available to tenants as storage. So there's no displacement of parking on those sites. And the site plan that has been submitted to the city outlines where parking is, and it is to city regulation.
Okay.
The one thing I had a question on the application is, so I saw the application, it's for $200,000, but in the details, it talks about the estimated development cost of unit of $30,000, and then so 30 times 6 is $180,000. So just curious where the $200,000 comes from when I see it looks like the total project cost is $180,000.
I think that perhaps have you looked at the pro forma, Barry? I don't know if y'all got the pro forma. I could share that if that would be something that would be helpful to you or possible.
Maybe what I'm looking at is the actual application.
Yeah. Where's that?
It looks maybe.
And Barry, I have the application available here if you want to.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking on page.
Just tell me where it is, and I'll take a look at it. But Kirk is. I think the point is Kirk has updated his pro forma, and the costs of construction as well as soft cost yield that $259,000 total project cost. I see where you are. Yes, you're on the size of D5, size and price of units, $30,000. I'm sorry that did not get updated in the renewed application.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, you may want to update that for HCD. Just because, yeah, that was the first thing I was like, whoa, where is the two? Should I say where 200,000 is justified when it says the total cost was 180,000? That would make sense if that was an application. So
that's correct. And as I said, there was a pro forma submitted with that application, and again, I could share that with the committee if you wish now. But I believe it's in the drive. I'm not certain, but I think it might be in the drive that was shared with you about the application.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's the only thing I saw. I mean, you may want to update that before it goes to HCD. But I think, I mean, overall, I mean, does anyone have, I mean, any thoughts about this as the application itself, or just as a project? I mean, this is as Jeff has said, in other states, especially in the Western states, like this has been all made by right to have generally two, one attached and one detached ADU by right, or triplexes by right. Here in here in Nashville, like ADUs are allowed by right, but not second ADUs. And I think that's this is one of the possibly lowest hanging fruit. Does anyone have any other any thoughts of projects like this, and whether we should really try to encourage more projects like this, and also what our thoughts are about like the financing, the cost per unit, if that sounds reasonable?
So yes, and yes. And I think, yes, the costs are reasonable. Yes, we need more of these kinds of units. We need to be able to rapidly identify opportunities to increase the amount of affordable housing, and particularly people who are willing to take vouchers.
Yeah, I think I'm glad to see that, I know this project's been around a while, and I think, there's to encourage landlords to take voucher housing, I think is, we definitely should encourage more of that. And I'm glad to see projects like this. There's always the comments about project aesthetics and parking, but most of those, at least the parking, it's that's something that always has to be proven to development services and zoning that it exists before these projects can move forward. And then as far as design standards, as Scott said, there really isn't any. We had a brief conversation about maybe when there's super dense projects with a lot of units, that maybe there should be ways to look into additional support for social services, that might be needed when you've got 30 or 40 together. But I think when it's clustered around in the communities broken up like this, I think these are good examples of mixed income. Chris?
Yeah, I'll just point out, Scott was making reference to that state legislature changes. I think, if that does come about, it'll be something that the build subcommittee needs to talk about, that with those changes, there'll need to be local UDO changes to prevent the difficulty. Because I think the idea here was really simple and low-hanging fruit to create affordable housing, but just some of the nuances of the details of the way the UDO is written just make it a challenge.
Yep. Margie?
The 6 houses that they're on the property, he owns all those houses, and those houses are all rentals for him also?
That's correct.
All right. Well, thank you. I don't know if we, I guess we really haven't discussed it. Like, so when we review these, basically we're reviewing these ahead of like the time that staff has provided. They haven't, Paul hasn't drafted the staff report yet to go to HCD. So we're getting the opportunity to review these applications before they go to HCD. Do we, as a committee, it's like, or do we want to just discuss these, and then staff can layer in any kind of our guidance to their staff applications, or do we want to take do we want to make votes for recommending these move on, or do we not? I mean, it's not really binding what we do, but what do we think as a committee we want to do with these, since this is new that we get to review these?
I think, even though we are an advisory body, it's kind of similar to how a lot of planning and zoning commissions work. They make advisory recommendations for approval or denial. And I think at least if HCD is considering AHAC's input, then we could act in the same manner of just making an advisory recommendation of approval or denial, or approval with modifications, what have you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm good with it. If we make a recommendation, yeah, we can make, let's give our board's recommendation. There's some legals. We have the right to do that. Yeah, I don't know what it's not. I guess it's not really binding, but I think we do have the right to do that. So do we want to? Would someone like to make a motion to recommend that that AHAC recommend that we give our approval for this? Would someone make a motion for that?
Barry, before we can I jump in on something before we make that motion? Sure. If we're going to make a formal recommendation to HCD rather than the discussion, I would have liked to have seen the full pro forma on this project. I think a lot of the concerns that I have around this is based on some of the developer's other projects. Is there an adequate amount included in the pro forma for the management of the property and the reserve and replacement of the property over time? And so I'd really like to have had that information along with the application before I felt comfortable weighing in on with a recommendation to HCD. So I don't know if that's possible, going forward. I don't know if it's possible on this one. Jeff was offering to share that pro forma, but I don't feel like I could get it right now and really dig into it and figure out whether the developer's plans for property management and reserve and everything were adequate to keep this property in good condition, given the density and sort of the adaptive reuse nature of it. I think those things present real challenges to the long-term management. So I'd just like to see that in the future.
I think we're kind of like squeezing our toe in the door to even get this going through us. So and I know we've kind of asked staff to in timeliness that we can we'll look at these the raw applications rather than the staff report. So maybe the way we word our motion is this kind of like a general blessing of the concept rather than like approving any details. But I think it will. How do others feel about that? I have enough without having the details, to feel comfortable giving a overall, blessing. We need more of these kind of projects. Paul?
Yeah, maybe the message is less specific to this project and more just, we like projects like this, or this is a good solution to the problem that we're working on.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know that I do like projects like this unless I see that there's on an adaptive reuse project like this with, that's kind of quasi single family, multifamily in nature. I don't know that I want to say that we want to see projects like this unless I know the developer has adequate, plans in the cost structure of the project to make sure that that it's going to thrive in the long term and be an asset to our community.
So is it fair to say that given the proper funding, you would like to see projects like this?
I think we could say that. But again, I've got to know that the project is going to, there's plans for it to be successful in the long run.
Well, maybe it's something that we need to address with Paul about, which is what I mentioned, maintenance of something like this, or that now we don't have anything, but if we're giving money for, this for 20 years, is there enough? And can we see some type of, recommend or get some type of agreement from the developer that they will maintain this property, this affordable property, in correct, maintenance and condition for 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if we
I
can
think
do that legally, but it's certainly something maybe we should look at.
Yeah. I want to be careful for, time, and then also for, where our scope, and that we're understanding where we can layer in, but we're also keeping a broad perspective on this, and I think, I think really the question is as much of like this kind of project. And it's like, and maybe what we do, just because I think it will help, because this is going to HCD, it's not going to come back through us. Maybe the broader motion we just make is that, that the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee recommends projects that encourage garage conversions and ADUs, and that we think $33,000 is an adequate per unit cost for a 20-year affordability requirement. Maybe that motion, that writing motion, basically sets more of the broad standards without us having to, give a full blessing to an application we don't have all the details on. Are people okay with that motion? Like that we recommend more projects like this that are garage and ADU conversions, and that $33,000 per unit is adequate, is a good number for a 20-year affordability requirement.
Hey, Barry, this is Paul here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate the conversation. My recommendation would be at this time just to not worry about a motion or a recommendation at this time. We have a meeting with our boards and commission folks next week, as this is kind of moving away from where AHAC has been in the past. So we've requested guidance from boards and commissions to understand exactly, within the purview of AHAC, all good. But before we know that, I think at this time, the discussion is great. But at this point, since we're not really sure where this goes with boards and commissions, I think at this time, a motion or recommendation wouldn't be required in staff's opinion.
Okay. Anybody else? Does anyone still, I personally hear what he says, but I like the idea of a motion, at least for the concept, but that's just me, but I don't want to push it. I don't want to, I want to move along if we don't want to do that. Paul?
Yeah, as I'm listening and learning here, I'm trying to think of sort of any downside, and we've pointed out some potentials. Running out of money, not having enough support, the property cleanliness, maybe. Certainly, there are lots of issues, but am I wrong? This is creating. This is, like we said, low hanging fruit. This quickly, easily, cheaply gets us some affordable units, more than what the small percentage of these new projects that are all going in. So with those have way more impact environmentally, and there's a slew of other sort of problematic issues with those larger projects. So what is it like? What would possibly be? I'm sitting here trying to think, like, what would be the downside? And again, yes, it has to be done right, but my gosh, yes, I definitely feel like, given something I'm overlooking or not considering, that this is something we should make a recommendation on.
Dewana, you have your hand up.
I just want to make sure I heard correctly. The price of these units is $3,000.
The cost of development is per unit, is right now at a total of $43,167 per unit, of which the city is being asked to fund $33,300 per unit. And that would be that is not it would be asked based upon the special terms that are in the Housing Trust Fund guidelines for units that are leased to households of 60% or less of median income, which is 2% interest only for the period of affordability, and with a balloon payment of the principal amount at the end of that time.
So another question. These are one bedroom units, like I'm trying to picture it in my head, like what the unit would be. I'm picking in a garage. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what that would look like.
Yeah, the footprint of the garage is the same as the footprint of the one bedroom unit above it. So it'll be the same layout. I don't have this in front of me. I think they're around 650 square feet per unit, which is fairly typical for an affordable one bedroom unit. Again, it would be ground floor access to the units.
Okay. So I think that I guess we'll float it. Again, we're not approving the application, but I think I'd like to feel like we're doing something. And for all the no's the city's been giving out lately, I'd like to at least give some positive spins and say we do encourage something in the city. So I would like to make a motion that Affordable Housing Advisory Committee recommends projects like this that encourage conversions of garages and additional ADUs, and that funding of $33,000 per unit for a 20-year affordability is standards we agree with.
I'll second that.
All right. Do we have any discussion before I take a roll call vote on that?
My only concern is putting in a $33,000 as a hard and known and understood figure. I think conceptually I agree with it. I'm concerned about the number, and that may be based on my lack of knowledge and experience or exposure, but that's my concern.
I'd leave the $33,000 out of it. Just same thing, but just leave it out because I don't know for sure that number is adequate or over and above.
Okay. All right.
I think
that is, that's fine. So
I think what we're discussing is that I guess the general concept, there's a phrase gentle density where you're doing conversions or slipping in an ADU here or there versus wholesale new buildings. I think that's the concept that we're talking through and agreeing with, and it's gentle density under the guise of incrementally increasing affordability through supply. So I realize it's kind of a wonky explanation of it, but I think that's what we're speaking to. So absent the specifics, yes, the general idea of, affordability under the guise of gentle density conversions, reconfigurations of existing buildings, I think is a low hanging fruit. So I agree with that in principle.
Let me adjust the motion then. So then what I'm going to do is adjust the motion to say that the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee recommends more projects that involve gentle density and garage and ADU conversions, and that the use of the Housing Trust Fund is appropriate for those uses. How's that?
As innovative projects.
Yeah. Have a second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that again. That's approved.
We want to discuss, does that sound better to folks? Do we have any more discussion on that before I roll call? Great. Thanks. All right. So we'll take a roll call vote on this. So please unmute and just say aye. Scott?
Aye.
Dewana?
Aye.
Paul Heathman?
Aye, for it.
Brian?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Margie?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Babs?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Thanks. I don't think Saki is here, right? Great. Well, thank you. Motion carries all aye. Thanks all. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to, as we're kind of trying to give our input here. And I think, yeah, it's like our role is not necessarily to approve applications, but I think the broad scope guidance we can say we encourage more stuff like this could put the message out in the community to encourage more people to do things like this of any kind of project, including the next one we're about to discuss. But I think, we as a committee can give, broad blessings like this to things that maybe can, encourage others to do it, because heaven knows we need more people at the table. But thank you all. Thanks to Jeff for joining. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me here today. Appreciate your input.
Yeah. All right, all. Next up, so the next application is it's a Luigi application for Millstone Management, and it's about a project on Long Shoals. Is there someone from the development team or the ownership that's on the call?
Yep, this is Owen Hartman here with Millstone.
Thank you, sir. Can you, if you could give us, we probably need to speed this through a little bit faster, but if you can kind of give me a broad scope of the project and kind of explain what you're doing, where you're doing it, how you're doing it, and I'd love to hear it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so again, I'm Owen Hartman, work for Millstone Management. I'm our development manager, and we've been almost a year now working on this project. It's located at 66 Long Shoals Road. Basically on the north side of Long Shoals, across from Lake Julian and next to TC Robertson High School. And it's a 2.85 acre site, and we are planning to develop 86 units. They're going to be two separate buildings. The front building is going to be a 3-4 split. The rear building is going to be a 4-5 split. This is going to be a conditioned corridor development. There'll be elevators in both buildings, and the corridors, like I said, will be conditioned. We're going to connect to the high school with our sidewalk system, and then we do have public transit and bus stops kind of right out in front of our site as well. So we love the location, obviously, and think that it's a great spot to add density for the city and add housing. And we're also going to be, to get into the affordable component, bringing 20% of that project. We're going to be offering as so 17 units will be at the 80% AMI level for 20 years. That's what we're proposing. 4 of those units will be housing choice voucher program units. And yeah, I can kind of open it up for questions after that, or however you want to take it.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Does everyone understand how the Luigi process works? So like, how would you describe in your words, like, the benefits that you get from this for your project? Obviously, how do you describe what to the developer the benefit of the Luigi is?
Yeah, so with new construction, obviously with where the cost is today, by offering affordable units, there's a gap, an obvious gap in what's financially feasible to make the project happen. And the way that the Luigi grant helps us is by providing those affordable units, we lower our income stream to a point where it makes it difficult to finance the project. And by receiving an abatement, that reduction in overall cost and tax kind of helps us bridge the gap of lowering our market rents, and kind of helps us make the project feasible from that standpoint. So it's really helpful for us when we're making that commitment to providing affordable units.
What is that like? So what is that in your project? Like, what does that work out to be? What is the tax abatement is for? It's basically, you get it for the whole project by offering a certain percentage affordable. And what does that amount work out to be?
Well, the way that I understand it is that through the land use incentive grant, the city portion of the incremental increase in taxes is abated for a certain period of time based on the table and the certain criteria that you meet through the Luigi grant. So we are, when looking at the table, and we've submitted to Paul, I don't know if Paul's still on the call here as well. We've submitted kind of a draft of our land use incentive grant to kind of be reviewed, and it outlines kind of exactly which criteria we're meeting as far as location, affordability level, and other commitments we're making to our project. And then through that table, there's a scoring system that then kind of outlines the number of years that we are eligible for the city portion abatement that I mentioned, that helps us kind of offset our decrease in income on the rent side by doing the affordable units.
Okay. It looks like 16. I'm looking at it. It looks like 16 years of the city portion of the property taxes. Looks like.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. Anyone have any other questions? I mean, this is, these are kind of typical kind of Luigi thing, projects. It's good to see the details and understand, because I think these real world things help us understand what we see and what folks are doing. Does anyone on the committee have any questions or comments on this? I don't see any. So, again, it's Duana. You see a hand up?
Yes. So what is the total units on the project? I'm skimming through the document. So how many total units is it?
So 86 total units, and so 20% of the project, which is 17 units, will be at the 80% AMI level for 20 years. That's what we're proposing.
And what number of bedrooms are those units?
I can tell you exactly if I can pull it up. We have ones and studios that will be at the 80% AMI level, and then we also have a handful of twos and threes. But I can provide that information if I can pull that up briefly in here. Sorry, I should have had that up for you.
Well, I can see Duana.
So we
skimming that.
Yeah, so we will have 12 studio units at the 80% level, and then we will have 5 one-bedrooms.
Okay. And so you said some of them will be some of them you will have set aside for the housing choice. Is that the one bedrooms?
We haven't gotten that far yet, but I'm open for discussion with that. So we haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Any other? Brian, you have a question?
Yeah. So, what is the actual mix of units of the 86? How many are studios, one bedrooms, et cetera?
Yeah, so we have 12 studio units. So 12 studio units, 34 ones, 36 twos, and 4 threes.
There's a mix. It's on. It looks like page 4, Brian. There's a mix of the units. Duana?
So I'm just curious as to like if you have a mixture of units. The affordability is only going to the studio and one, like I'm just trying to understand that concept when I think about our housing crisis here. We do definitely have a big need for the 1 bedrooms, but also for the family units as well. So I'm just trying to understand why y'all only have 12 studios, if you just said correctly, and all 12 of those are on the 80%. And I'm just trying to process that and trying to get an understanding of y'all's rationale around that.
Yeah. So that, to answer that question, basically we're trying to provide the highest level of affordability while still being financially feasible. So it comes down to square footages. And when a 2-bedroom unit is 1,100 square feet and a 1 bedroom is 650 to 750 and a studio is smaller, we can make that commitment due to the cost being lower because of the square footage requirement of those units and the corresponding rent levels, being able to make that happen. So that's a really quick answer to a very a larger issue of construction costs nowadays. So
so with that, and as y'all make y'all assessment through y'all's financing, because I'm sure y'all already are doing that, what is the 80%? Like what would 80% rent look like? What does it look for a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment?
Yeah, so there's actually a table, and I don't want to misspeak. I don't want to misspeak on that.
So
Paul,
this is Paul here. If y'all can hear me, this is Paul. Yeah, that's Appendix 1 that we just published and sent out to everybody. I'm happy to pull that up on my phone. I thought we attached it to this, but perhaps not, or it was last month. But I'll take a quick look just to give you an idea.
Yeah, I think the guidelines. I mean, yeah, I think we do. I think we approved some of those new standards of the last, or discussed at the last meeting. So, can I just ask, when we look at projects like this, what do you see there's a mix? Obviously, it makes sense that there's going to be, when there's square footage, they can get more units by having more smaller units. Are you thinking there's a need that you'd like to see filled more for larger family size units or 2 bedrooms, Duana? Is that kind of the point you're trying to make?
No, like I'm looking at, like when I listened to the previous report around the housing and the housing choice vouchers and people who are looking for units, whether it's 1 or 2, even in the city, even in our city limits, like 80% AMI affordability for residents that's trying to move out of public housing would still be a challenge, because like even those sliding scale fees. So I'm trying to see a number. So I'm looking at the appendix, I'm looking through, and there's percentages, but there's no number as to what would that rent amount be per month for a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment. And so that's what I'm just trying to understand how we're defining affordability. And if possibly those numbers, that would be great.
Yeah, that's what I got for you here. Just, and again, this was something that just went through last month, but for 80% area median income based on the 2021 figures from HUD, a studio efficiency 80% AMI. If the landlord pays water, sewer, and trash, the rent would be $956. For a 1-bedroom, it comes in at $1,021. If someone carries a voucher with them, the HACA voucher payment standards. The efficiency studio rent is $1,073, up to $1,073, and the one bedroom is up to $1,127, with max rent with landlord paying water, sewer, trash.
So I guess that speaks to why I asked the question. And as we are the affordable housing, like for me, and I just in general looking at our low income communities or our incomes that's under that 80% or at the 80%, that's my mortgage. You know what I mean? Like when I think about the payment of $1,020, like that's mortgage prices, but we're calling it affordable rental. And I just be wanting to make sure that I understand the unit sizes and different things like that that's tying to these numbers.
Yep. Yeah, there's this, well, like, yeah, we have the standard guidelines were approved for that, set those. And then, yeah, the voucher payments are, yeah, as we've seen, like the voucher payments are higher than, are higher than what the 80% AMI top rents are. But, so projects, so again, just for some consistency, we made a motion to ride along for the last project. So again, I'm kind of a blessing of projects like this, a ride along motion that we can do as a committee. I think at least if nothing else makes us feel good or makes me feel good that we're encouraging more projects like this. Is everyone okay with that? Again, of a broad motion to a broad scope motion that we encourage more developers to join our community to use the Luigi tool to create more affordable housing.
Yeah, definitely.
My only concern is that they've created specialty units that are not normally being rented to other tenants. So we have 12 of the units that were created as efficiencies, but they're not renting out these efficiencies. They're not creating any other efficiency units. So we're just creating a second class of housing within the project for affordability purposes. And so I think we just have to be cognizant of that fact. So like when we're subsidizing one bedroom units and they're the same units that other people would be accessing, I'm fine with it. I have a bit more of a problem when we just create studio apartments with potentially, I'm not sure if they're the same fixture and finish as the other ones. And that's my problem with the project. If you were renting out 12 other efficiencies and they were all the same, then I wouldn't have that concern. But we've created specialized housing in a building specifically for tenants who have lower income. And I think that's where you kind of get into that segregated housing issue.
And thank you for making that statement, Brian. That is my concern as well. I was looking for the words to state it as eloquently as you just did, but that is my concern as well.
I agree.
How about this? Yeah, how about this? Because that's a good point. How about again, our broad motion that we encourage, more Luigi projects to come, such as this, and we do encourage more. We do encourage that the unit mix is spread equal. I'm trying to think of a way, like how to handle this, and also make our broad recommendation that we approve projects like this. But we'd also like to see that some unit mixes are not solely the affordable units. Does anyone have I'm fumbling with the words, but if anyone has a way to word that, I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, the developers aren't creating specific classes of units only for the purposes of meeting the affordability requirement.
Yeah.
And again, Barry, this is Paul here. I appreciate that everyone is trying to be more engaged. Repeating myself, have reached out to boards and commissions as this level is veering off of this committee. So I, again, would just, like I did last time, advise that I don't think a motion at this point, as this is beyond the scope of AHAC, is appropriate. But however y'all can do what you would like to do with some type of supportive motion or non-supportive motion. But again, I just the aspect of AHAC and its bylaws and its purpose, I just want to advise from a staff perspective that we are entering into uncharted territory here without the guidance of boards and commissions.
Paul, I have a question for you, Paul. I'm sorry, I'm just curious. So as the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, and as we've asked that these come before us before we're on HCD, like, I'm just trying to understand, like, we have no say. Are our recommendations through our vote not go be passed on to HCD along with these applications?
No, right now, if it is my understanding correctly, that the AHAC committee advises and helps create policy, not for specific projects to be reviewed and or approved by this committee. It has not in my 3-year history with the city, and that is my understanding, that it's a policy advisory committee to enhance and assist with the creation of policy and sharing of data and information.
Yeah, I hear you and understand that, and I think what we're trying to come up with our broad, because it is good to have these specific examples, so how we can advise or say, hey, these are good examples or not. And again, as a policy, as an advisory committee, I think we do have the ability to encourage more kinds of projects like this. And, minor blessings go a long way, I think. But yeah.
Again, Barry, your choice, Barry.
Yes.
Again, your choice as the chair, but just advising from a staff level, just to be consistent with city policy.
Yeah. Boards and commissions happy to reach out to me. Yeah. And I'll.
Yeah. So
I've seen so many negative things recently that I'd like to encourage a few things. Joe?
Yeah. So, Paul, what are the consequences of us having a committee resolution? If it doesn't fall within the guidelines, then does it just become null and void? I mean, I'm curious about that.
Again, just without any precedent or nothing in the bylaws or the creation of this committee that talks about the projects, staff just advises that at this point, until we work with boards and commissions to figure out how it looks, we really do try to follow process and procedure at the city. And so it's when we veer off of that, staff's role, if I understand correctly, is to advise that we're veering off of process and procedure for this committee. Again, chair has the right to, I believe, do however he'd like. So our advising would be that as we move away from that, the importance of having a motion or something to approve at this point without having it being a part of AHAC is just, again, moving further into uncharted territory. We'll still move it forward and all that stuff, but we have our meeting with boards and commissions next week.
I don't see this as
so it does no harm, just advising.
Yeah. I don't see it as anything we're discussing is out of the scope of what I think as a multi-year chair of this committee and long-term member, it seems like what we're talking about is the same thing we've talked about for years, and it's not out of the scope. We're just now, we're actually making some motions that that are about some specific examples, but I don't see if these discussions are any different than what we talked about. And I'm fine with the motion up here. Last time, do we just, again, I don't want to, I'm happy to make up a motion, a writer motion. Do we have a little discussion? Do we want to do that, or do we want to get put back in our cages?
Andy's hand was raised for a minute. He keep raising his hand, but not getting a chance to speak.
Who does? Who?
I just want to say that this is one of the reasons that this committee has the depth of expertise that it does, is that we all have different disciplines, but that's why we can speak to the various things and advise that there might be an issue here. I think that is within the scope, and I'm certainly sure that the developer would be appreciative of how that might be helpful to them on this or other projects.
Yeah, Scott.
I can certainly empathize with Paul D. As someone that also works with commissions and boards. I would be perfectly fine just taking a wait and see approach within the next week or so, just to get a little more clarification from the city on what AHAC can and cannot formally advise on.
I think this does give us a good way to look at, if our role is around advising on policy, then, we can certainly take the discussion that we've had this morning around the unit mix, and use it as a way to flag something for input on the Luigi policy. We discussed that at length a couple of years ago in this committee. And as somebody who was involved in, I think the presumption around the unit mix of the affordable units and the, in an approved project, wasn't something that we talked about. And I think there was a presumption that the mix of affordable units within a development would mirror the overall mix of units within the development. And if we need to go back and clarify that in the policy based on the conversation that we just had and what we think as a advisory committee is in the best interest of our community, then, we wouldn't have surfaced that. In all of the time we spent on the Luigi policy, we didn't surface that issue until we talked about it on a specific project. So there's an advantage to us looking at these things, even from our policy advisory role. And, whether or not we vote on something today for this particular project, it gives us context for that particular, for the function that we are convened as a city body to take on.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the value of the thing that came out of this discussion that does come from real world examples, which is why I think we've now, really tried to push to see these, because these are things we discuss about, and it's actually good to hear from a developer's perspective what exactly Luigi is and how the benefits use, and then for us to see the unit mix, and then for us as a policy to say, okay, we encourage more projects like this. And believe me, right now, any developer in town, there's developers outside, they need a little bit of encouragement to come here. And that's my little step of why I think these motions have a little bit of value, because even if it's not for the city, it's to other developers like, you know what, we really do need you here, even though it seems like we might be taking other actions and other steps that we don't want you here. So that's as much of anything, some of my reasoning for this is that we do want to see more Luigi projects, that we do want to see them in different parts of town, and that we now are saying that we've learned from this that we want to see more of a balanced unit mix when Luigi applies. And I would like to make a motion for that, but I also want to push it, or if anyone's not comfortable with it. So can we have a quick, are we okay with the motion, or should I drop it? Can someone give me some direction?
Could you just repeat the motion again, Barry? I'm sorry.
The motion is that AHAC encourages more developers to come to town to use the Luigi process, and that we encourage a balanced unit mix for when the affordability applies to them with Luigi.
I would recommend just abstaining or pausing until we have further guidance from city staff on just making advisory motions.
I have a motion. I have a motion. Is everyone okay? Brian, were you okay with the wording of that, or should I adjust it? I'll put a motion out there and we'll see if it floats.
Yeah, no, first of all, I agree with Andy that it clearly should be within our charter to be able to recommend comments on policy, but maybe not specific developers. And so as long as we're not talking about Millstone specific project, I think we can make all sorts of recommendations here. And I think the motion around encouraging more Luigi development is a good one. And I think encouraging a balance of units is a good one. The only third element I would like to add is that we would like to see that their units aren't limited to only affordable housing units. So I do not, in this example brought to the light to me, that we're creating specific units just to meet the affordability unit in these small efficiencies. And I just think that's not correct.
Yeah. So I'm fine with, that the unit mix is balanced and that there's not a sole class of units that meet the affordable standard?
Yeah, that's a great, sole class of units is a great terminology.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to float that rough motion. Do I have a second on it?
I'll second it.
We have a discussion before we vote? No. Do a roll call vote. Scott?
I abstain.
Joanna?
Aye.
Paul Heathman?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Margie?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Babs?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Randy?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Motion carries. I may not be here next month. So we'll see what Boards of Commission has to say about that. But I do appreciate, I appreciate that. And I don't think we're advising on a specific, case, but I think, that these bring to light the actual discussions that do help us shape policy better than sometimes they're bringing these conversations are out better than broad conversations. I think specific examples are great. So I appreciate your support, for that discussion. And again, I think, any developers coming to town need as much encouragement as we can.
Did we lose Barry?
Am I out? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
can hear
okay.
you.
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate that. And I think this is in the scope.
Way out.
Yeah. I think it's in the scope of, from what I know, this feels to me in the scope of what we do as a committee. It doesn't feel in my years on this committee and years as chair that it feels out of bounds. So, but if we stepped out of bounds or I stepped out of bounds, I'm sure I'll hear about it. But thank you. And thank you, Owen, for joining us and watching our funny little here.
Thanks, guys.
Guys and gals. All right. So with that, we're about, we have a few more things, but I think this is an interesting meeting, and I really do like having these real world examples. Do we have any, Angelica, do we have any public comment online?
We do not have any callers for public comment.
Okay. Thank you. There is, so I guess, I'll just kind of breeze through this last bit of our agenda then. So there was this, I see still on the agenda, there's a partner event with Lotstar in August. Is that still in float, or is that just hanging on the agenda? Do we know?
I believe that you and Matt Allen from Land of Sky Realtors were going to get together to discuss a possible partnership for some type of outreach meeting in August or September.
Okay. I have not heard from him, but I'll look for his I'll try to reach back out to him.
We still have a couple of items on new business that we need to get to.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
We're running very close to being out of time.
Yeah, Barry, I don't think there's anything urgent on the new business that can't wait until next meeting.
Okay.
Do you all want to continue waiting on Barry to come back, or do you want to try to go forward and try to cover a couple? I don't know, on the rehab mortgage insurance. Was there somebody doing a presentation on that?
Margie, we can hear Barry from our end.
I can't hear you.
I think Margie's out there. So it sounds like the things that are on the agenda, it seems like the things that we have out there, the 403K rehab, mortgage insurance, and the eviction. Is there, what
that can all wait till next month, Barry?
What's that? You
that
said it
can all wait till next month, correct?
Okay. All right. Is the eviction moratorium is, I guess, the one thing I will ask is, I know we talked in our last meeting as that's coming up, there was some talk about what, maybe we can look to suss out for the next meeting, what exactly are the options for folks as this ends for support. I know there's been some question that we brought up last time about those that as the eviction moratoriums are ending, that there's a debt load that's going to be remaining on some of past rent, and how that's going to be dealt with, and what are some of the options for people to deal with that. So it's just we'll talk about that for next, but I do want to kind of get maybe a little bit more insight on that. So I will send out. I'll send it out this afternoon so I don't forget the information about our committees, so we can do those polls for setting dates, and I'd like to kind of do those in July if we can. I appreciate that. And we had no public comments. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say or join or suggest?
I just saw that somebody did join the speaker queue. I mean, I know we're a little bit over time, but would you like to hear the comment?
Please.
Okay, one moment. Okay, caller, you're now on.
Hello?
Are you able to hear us?
Yes, hello, this is Greg Borum with Children First Community Schools. Can folks hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we
Hi,
can
Greg.
now, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm not hearing anything, but I will continue to speak and hope that it's getting through. I just wanted to comment on the conversation around the type of units that we're building for affordability. Appreciate the committee raising up the issue of there needing to be units that can work for families with children, and the idea of making sure that developments that bring in affordable units aren't just defaulting to a studio apartment, but are helping us solve that issue for children with families. I'd also like to raise up the issue of the American Rescue Plan funds. Both the city and county have funding to work with, and we would love to see a open kind of community engaged discussion on how we can center needs of children and family housing affordability in that. There's a new toolkit that our partners at the state level at NC Child have created for compiling how to kind of look at the needs of children and families in the ARP funding discussions. And so I just wanted to raise that to this committee's attention. I'm happy to share a link, Barry and Paul, with y'all for that toolkit, as well as some other resources for that, and hope that there can be ongoing community input and discussions, and this committee joining in that as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Greg. Well, thank you all, and I appreciate the public comment. Appreciate that it was related to even what we had an important discussion about. So thank you all. I do hope we will be live next month. We'll find out. And I'll send out that information on so we can set up our task force meetings. Over and out. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.